Welcome to the Dr. Donna podcast, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 108, Aging, Part 3. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
I'm Dr. Donna. Welcome to my podcast. I've been talking about aging, and, as I talk to my friends and, people online about what kinds of issues they would like to hear me talk about. And when I bring up life on life's terms, that's kind of a big one. And, because living life on life's terms is all you can do. But today I'm going to talk about a big piece of that living on life's terms. And that is where I left off last time, which is the final stage or the last stage or the next stage of aging. And, if you are lucky enough to live long enough to age and become older, like, I don't know what they would call them, 80s, 90s, 100s, whatever. That last stage, that final stage, that next stage is dying. And, that's an important piece of our life, because the minute that you are born, you are in that process of you're growing, you're learning, but you're also dying. We're all doing it all the time. It's, a process by which your cells don't divide as fast anymore. You don't heal like you used to. I want to tell you that I had an experience the other night in my bed while I was asleep. I was suddenly awoken because I had just pulled some kind of muscle in my shoulder. You hear people talk all the time about, when I wake, this is for old people, this is what we do. It's like, we wake up in the morning, we say, it's like, I wonder what I did to myself last night while I was sleeping. And, we laugh about it, but I actually did pull my shoulder while I was sleeping. And it woke me up because it hurt. And today when I was working out, I could feel it. It's like I really did pull something the other night. It's such a weird thing. But that's because my body does not bounce back. It's not as resilient. Now, I'm not giving up, let me tell you. I still walk, hike, snowshoe, and cross-country ski at least 4 or 5 times a week. I walk every day. But the hiking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, I do that at least 4 or 5 times a week. And we're not talking, mini hikes here. We're talking anywhere from 7 to 15 miles every time. And I do upper body workouts. I use 10 or 8 or 5-pound weights, depending on what I'm doing, which workout I'm doing. And I do that religiously. And so I am not exactly what you would call a sedentary person. I know that it is important for me to do everything I can to keep my body strong and to keep my strength up and to, I do all the things that they tell you. Okay, doctors and, people who know about this process. But nonetheless, I am in the process of dying. Now, I've been with people who have died. I worked in the emergency room, for crying out loud, of two trauma centers. And so I've been with people when they've died. That was part of my job. And I remember when I was in Phoenix at the Maricopa County Medical Center, they call it Trauma Center now, And a young man who'd been on a motorcycle had gotten in a crash, and they brought him in as fast as they could, but he had pretty severe injuries. There was no way. I mean, he might live now with all the, I don't think so, though. He had pretty severe injuries. And the doctor came in and he said, would you please go in and hold this guy's hand? He's got bad injuries, head injuries. His bones are broken. His back is broken. Everything's broken. And he said, there really isn't anything we can do for him. So we're going to go on to the next one. And he said, so I'd like you to go in and hold his hand. I said, okay, that's part of my job. So I went and I held his hand while he died. And he couldn't hold my hand back because he was, what we would call, he was in distress. He wasn't completely out, okay? Frontal lobe head injuries will do that. People get like really agitated. And it didn't last long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But I held his hand and I watched him breathe his last breath. And I thought, wow, he's 22 or something like that. I thought, he wasn't very much younger than me at the time. And I thought, he just missed out on his life. And, when I hear people saying, oh, he died doing the thing he loved the most, it's like, well, maybe when you're 22, you really love riding motorcycles at high rates of speed. But that changes. For most people, that's not going to be the thing they love most in their life. And when you are elderly and you're looking at that next phase of dying, which is, that's the next phase, it's like you are really understanding that, what I really loved doing when I was 22 or 32 or 42 or 52, what I really loved doing at that time, I may or may not be really loving doing that now. Okay? It's like when I was 52, I was in that was when I was doing the most work I was ever doing. That's when I started thinking about writing my book seriously. Although it took me a while because, I was a single mother of a son, and, that kind of took a lot of my energy and time when I wasn't working. But I really had a lot of energy towards what I was doing. I loved my work. Always. I still do. I loved being a mother to my son. I loved that in a, capital L kind of way. I loved it. I still love being a mother to a son, but he's a grown man. He's got his own son. He's got a wife. They have their own life. And so I'm no longer mothering him, which is a verb. It's something you do, but I'm still his mother, and that brings me joy. But it's not the same kind of, I love doing this, because I don't do it. He does his own life. I love my work still, but only really do that work once a week. And I love doing my podcast, but I only do that once a week. And so I've got all this other stuff I do. I've always loved to hike. I've always loved to be in nature. I've always loved to be in the mountains and the desert. Doesn't matter where it is, except I'm not terribly fond of being out on a boat in a lake or something. There's something about that troubles me. I don't know if it was that drowning dream I had, but whatever. But when you are, in that next stage of life, dying stage, you start to realize that the things that you've really loved over time, some of them are still there, but you do it in a different way. Okay. Like, I no longer think about, I no longer think about climbing the biggest mountains in the world. Okay. When I was young, and then the thought never came to me because I was young and I was female and women didn't do that. Probably a good idea that I'm not 25 now because I'd be trying to get a permit to go on top of Everest, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to climb the highest mountains in the world. And so when I say I go hiking during the summer, because in the winter it's pretty snowy and cold, and that's never stopped me before, and it doesn't stop me now, but it kind of, I'm not a big fan of post-holing. For those of you who don't live in the mountains in the snow, post-holing is when you're trying to walk through really deep snow and your leg goes through the snow and you're up to your neck in snow. Or at least it's really hard to walk. And so, hiking is still something I love to do. And fortunately, I live in a place where I can go to the mountains or the desert. Doesn't matter. I live right in the middle. And so I go out in the desert and I do some hiking and, then I go do some snowshoeing and all that. And I love that. But I know that at some point that will probably be minimized. My guess is that I likely won't be doing 15 miles in one day when I'm, say, 90. I'll still be doing it as long as I live. And my mother, when she was dying, and I had the privilege and honor of being there with her while she was dying and when she died that day, that night. But the most important thing to her when she was dying was to think that her children had mended their fences with one another. And that was her goal in life, even though she was a farmer/rancher. Okay. Her love was waking up in the morning, fixing a big breakfast so her and Dad could go out and ride in the range, go look for cows up in the canyons, whatever. And they did this, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it. And, but when she was dying, the most important thing to her was to think that when she left this earth, that her children would be friends. And I guess in her heart, she felt that because we were all there one day, in her heart, she felt that they were friends. Maybe they could stay friends. Their children could be friends, and on, so that her, legacy could be one of, I have children who are friends, who care for each other, love one another, all that. And I don't know how that will work out, but it's a lot different than how I feel about what I think my dying wish will be. I don't know what my dying wish will be because I'm not dying right now. I'm in the process, but I've still got a ways to go. And when you're older, it's an interesting thing to me that when you're older and you start talking about dying and what that's like, people want you to be quiet right away. Like, shh, be quiet right away. You're too young. You're too active. You're too this. You're too that. You're not going to, it's like, don't talk about that. And so, you're shushed pretty fast. And I don't know. I've always wondered, did I do that to people? Did I tell them to stop talking about that. And if I did, what would my reasoning be? One would be, well, I don't want you to, it's like if I'm a young person, I'm telling an old person, don't talk about that. Is it because I'm afraid? Or is it because I'm afraid that they're afraid? And so I don't want them to be afraid, and I don't want them to think that they're, getting old. Hello, old people know we're getting old. But the dying thing is pretty big. Now, what I've noticed, because, having worked, I said this before, in the emergency room where there was much death, was that there were people who died that were terrified out of their minds. They were really scared. And most of them couldn't say what they were afraid of because they were either too injured or they were too old and weren't speaking anymore, or, they had had a stroke and couldn't speak. Whatever the problem was, I rarely knew what they were afraid of. But as I've gotten older and I've actually been present in people's dying in their final moments, I think that I could tell you, well, because she's gone, but my mother was pretty terrified of dying. I think until the night that she died, and she was just so tired of fighting and trying to stay alive. It wasn't going to work for her. She was trying to stay alive, and she had a condition that wasn't going to allow that no matter how much she fought. But she was afraid of dying. Part of that was growing up in a family, in a culture that said, if you didn't do it perfect and you didn't repent when you didn't do it perfect, you had to repent. You had to repent in a way where you had promised to be perfect. And I know she tried. I know that, the things that bothered her a lot. It's like she really tried to make amends for that and to atone for that. And at the end of the day, I don't think that she ever thought she was good enough, that she did it well enough or perfect enough. And I know she told me, she says, God's so mad at me. It's like, why? You are a kind, generous, loving person. It's like you're a person that takes in strays, and I'm not talking about dogs and cats. I'm talking about people. I remember when I was very young, maybe 7 or 8 or 9, we lived, in 10, 11. It's like we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and this was back in the 50s. Always a train track nearby. And what you call hobos used to jump off the train, and us kids would find them because we were out wandering around in the desert or the mountains, whatever. And we would bring them home. And my mother would, let's have some breakfast together. Let's cook dinner and invite them. And they would sit at our table with us, our little table in our trailer. She would cook for them as well as us, and then they'd be on their way. She took in strays. She had kids living with us that weren't my sisters and brothers, but they needed to be someplace. And so she was so generous with her time and her talents. She was so talented. She never believed it. She didn't think she ever was good enough. And I'm not talking about perfection in a way of, I'm the most perfect basketball player. I'm the most perfect therapist. It's not like that at all. Her thing was about being the most perfect person. And I kept telling her, Mom, we're not perfect by nature because we're human beings. And we make mistakes. It's just what we do once we make the mistake. Am I going to do it different? Am I going to make amends? It's like, it really matters what comes next. And of course, because I'm her child, she, I think she believed me to an extent, but I can tell you right now that when you have children and you get older, you don't really see them as terribly wise, even if they are, because they're younger than you. Remember, I've said before, probably in my first year, that wisdom only comes with age. It only comes with age. And, people used to tell me, oh, you're wise beyond your years. And I bought that when I was young, but now I look back on it and it's like, okay, well, I had wisdom because of the way I grew up, but that was just my experience of growing up in a situation where I grew up, not because I had some inherent wisdom. My wisdom came from aging, and it still comes from aging. Like, I think about dying now, and I think about it as, a process that culminates with my last breath. And, there's a great book that I've been reading. It's this woman has written 2 books, and I'm going to tell you about them. Her name is Margareta Magnusson, and she's from Sweden. And she wrote the book, The Swedish Art of Aging Exuberantly. And the underneath, what she, is life wisdom from someone who will, quote unquote, probably die before you. And when she wrote this book, she was 84. And she also wrote, before that, she wrote The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. I haven't read this yet, but there is a chapter. She talks about death cleaning a lot in her book. But it gave me a perspective, a couple of things that she said that I'm going to share with you that she writes. And it's, if you're out there and you are afraid of dying, let me tell you this. Some of the things that people are afraid of in this world, big things, is that the world's going to end. Okay? Well, guess what? The world is always ending. We're still here, but the world is always ending. And she says, I have lived through World War II, the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Chernobyl, and now climate change. And then she says, and this is part of her book, here's how to cope with 80 years of constant doom and hold on to your sense of humor. Well, she's very funny. I mean, if you want to read a book about dying, that's hysterical. Her books are really, really good. Some of the things she says is, don't leave empty-handed. We can't take us with it. We can't take it with us after we're gone. While we're here, there are many ways to improve the world every day. And, there's a lot to be said just for those things. When you're dying, you can say, well, my life is over. I might as well just, and I've heard people say this because, well, I've worked with people who were dying, but I've also been with people who have died. And instead of thinking about, well, my life is over, I guess, blah, 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 there's probably something you could do unless, you have Alzheimer's or some kind of condition that prevents it. There's probably something you can do every day that will leave the world a better place. Okay? It might be just simply, I'm going to use less water. I'll take a shorter shower. I'll wear my clothes more than once. Then I won't have to wash them as much. I mean, there are many things that you can do to make the world a better place every day. And I'm just talking about when you are in that process of dying and you are thinking about what next? How am I gonna leave? I talked about some of the things that happen when you're aging, how you get invisible, how people don't take you seriously. That's just crazy to me. I mean, we know more about what the world is about than you do. If you're younger than us, we just do. That's how you get wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge. Knowledge in a way that you can't get it unless you are older. It's useful to have, I said, I think last time, it would be good to have a book on aging. Well, I found one. Magnusson. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about her because I think that what she says is important. And the way she puts it makes you laugh, which is one of the main ways. That's one of the primary ways of living life on life's terms, is learning to laugh at yourself, number one, but laugh at the, insanity sometimes in the world. So I'm going to continue to talk about this next time. I hope you'll join me.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Donna podcast here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Dr. Donna podcast is copyright 2023 Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.